written, but the quality comes first, and there are certain things. One of the things is I think it's going to be big, and I'm worried it's going to be really big. When they did decide, they said, yes, we're going to split it, as I really always knew that they were going to do. I had already begun working in my head how I was going to suggest that it be split, and out of that split, I built The Gathering Storm. And I built it very intentionally to be a very focused book. It focuses primarily on two major characters' plot lines and the characters around them, and specifically, those two plot lines work very well together because certain things are happening parallel or maybe oppositely parallel from one another as these two characters are experiencing what's going on in this book. In order to achieve that, and in order to get the book to you on time, that meant that a certain number of side characters had to be set aside for a little while. They all need to return in Towers of Midnight. And I don't mean to cut anything from anyone else in order to put them in, which may end us with a very long book. Yes, it should be November. The third one, they have scheduled for November the year after that. I'm going to work very hard to get it to you, but I make no promises on that. Robert Jordan, it took him about 2 years a book to write on these, and to get The Gathering Storm to you in the time I did, I actually worked 14-hour days for about 18 months. The fortunate thing about that was I actually, because I did that, during part of that I wrote part of Towers of Midnight, which allows us to have part of that already finished. I realize people have been waiting a very long time, but I have to make sure the stories are done right. And my instincts seem to have proven correct on The Gathering Storm by the reaction from the readers. And so I need to trust my instincts. So we will see. It will not be a terribly long time, but it will be as long as it takes. Just so you know, in conjunction with both of these, I am not expanding the story to add extra things in. Let's just make that absolutely clear. I'm taking the outline, and alongside that, the plot threads that I feel need to be tied up, and I'm building from that, and I'm not trying to take it and say, let's keep this going as long as possible. It is going to be as long as Jim promised. And I'm not trying to make it any longer or any shorter. All right, right there.
It seems from your website you have a lot of different projects going at once.
Yes.
Do you write like all that? So you write like part of it, part of the day you work on one thing and part of the day you work on the next. I mean, how do you decide how to do that?
The question was, I often have a lot of projects going on at once, and how do I balance what I'm working on at one point or another? I have found that I can generally only be writing on one book at a time. New material for a book. I have to be very focused, and I have to be in that world. And so I'm generally only writing one book at a time. But I found that there's only a certain amount of new pages I can do in a day. It kind of sucks out a certain part of you, and then you need to rest and do it again. And so in order to if I'm going to work a very long day, and get this, what I'll end up doing is editing other sections of the book for the rest of the time, or working on things, on plot outlines or things like that. And so I'm always only writing on one thing at a time, but I'm usually editing several things. In the case of Towers of Midnight, or Gathering Storm, in my head, there are essentially several different books going on inside this book, and I'll be writing on one and editing on another. Or I'll be writing on one and revising on another, or things like this. And that's how I divide my time. Generally, first thing I do is I get up and I do my new pages for the day. And that can take anywhere from, generally I get up and work until dinner time. So, depends on when I get up. A lot of days, most days I get up at about 10 o'clock. So, I generally work through lunch. So I'm working from about 10 until 5. On new material, and then I will go upstairs, and I have a 2-year-old son, and so we'll play. Right now it's play cars. Generally involved in naming the colors of the cars. And then he goes to bed at 7, and I will go back to work. And work until, and then I'll be editing and answering email and revising and all of these things. All right, next question. Let's do right over here.
Obviously, the Wheel of Time influenced you greatly even before you were got this task.
Yes.
Do you think Robert Jordan's characters in any way kind of influenced your own characters in your other novels?
Did Robert Jordan's characters influence the characters in my novels? I think that it is impossible for me to separate out Robert Jordan's influence on me. It's as difficult to do that as it would be to separate out Tolkien's influence on the generation before me. So when you go and you read Terry Brooks and you read Donaldson and Eddings and all of these, and even Robert Jordan himself, that generation very heavily influenced by Tolkien in that in some ways people were reacting against him, in some ways they were reacting toward him, and things like that. It's the same sort of thing for me. Robert Jordan, The Wheel of Time was the epic fantasy series of my generation. I was reading Wheel of Time long before I read Tolkien. I would say it heavily influenced me. One of the original things I wrote in that eulogy there for Robert Jordan was that I found myself reacting against some of the things he'd done with my own fiction, and you'll see this. Reacting against in the way that he has already done certain stories so well that to do them I would either need to parody him or copy him or just do a worse version of it. And so because of The Wheel of Time, you find me stretching toward other areas. The Mistborn series is, for instance, a direct reaction to The Wheel of Time. It's the post-modern fantasy epic. Mistborn, if you're not familiar with it, is the series about what happens when evil wins, when the Dark Lord wins. What if the Dark One had won? What if Sauron had gotten the ring? Or what if Voldemort had killed Harry Potter? Or what if Rand had failed? And that is the history of this book series. And it really is what if Rand had failed. In fact, if you read the series, you'll see there's a story. He's not a sheep herder. I think he's a blacksmith happening in the background 1,000 years ago, who was an unknown who rose to power and became the king and became the savior of mankind and went to the mountain to defeat evil and failed. And that's the history of the Mistborn world, and the books themselves follow a gang of thieves who are now trying to rob the Dark One, rob the Dark Emperor, and bribe his armies away from him. But you can see that influence there affecting me saying, okay, this is one thing that Robert Jordan did. I can't do that. What can I do that's different and make it my own? All right, let's take 2 more questions. We'll do you and then one of these guys on the way back. So,
I really enjoyed on your website how you have the annotations for the Mistborn series. You explain how you got your ideas and why you did what you did. Do you expect to be able to do that for the Memory of Light?
The question is, on my website, I do annotations of my books. These are like DVD director's commentary. I read a chapter, and then I write